There we go. Okay. Hey everybody, my name is Anna. I am the Twin Cities DSA Electoral Committee co-chair, and I am here with Risa, who's a park board candidate for our last electoral endorsement season Q&A of 2021, which is exciting. And so the way that this is going to go is we have had members submit questions via an every action form in advance of this Q&A. So I will read the questions that came in through the form first and have you answer those. And then we will shift after we've run through those to questions that folks submit via the live Q&A feature in Zoom. So if folks aren't familiar with that, the way that you can submit a question is by hovering over the video section in Zoom, and you'll see at the bottom two little chat bubbles, and it says Q&A below it. And if you click that, a window will pop up that has the ability for you to enter in a question that everyone will be able to see then. So we will do the form questions first, and then shift over to those live questions from that Q&A feature. And then that'll be that. So that's kind of how the night will go. We are recording this, like I mentioned. That'll be available on the Twin Cities DSA Wiki and on social media next week. So I think we are ready to roll now. So Risa, do you want to maybe introduce yourself and the campaign, and also maybe for folks who aren't super familiar with the park board, just talk a little bit about kind of what the park board is and what it does too.
Yeah, totally. And Anna, feel free to hop in if there are any specifics that would be helpful for this meeting. But my name is Risa Hustad. I use pronouns like they and them. And I am running for the Minneapolis Park Board Commissioner in District 6, which is the district south of Lake Street and west of 35W. It was a seat formerly held by Brad Bourne, and Brad Bourne is not running for re-election. I am a transportation advocate, an environmental justice organizer, and for the better part of last year, I spent a lot of my time working to support folks that were taking shelter in Martin Luther King Park, which is nearby my home. Built a coalition of neighbors to get direct supports to folks there, and that is how I became most involved in the inner workings of Park Board. But I'm a person who is generally fairly plugged into like local politics because of my transportation advocacy work. I'll just say a little bit about like what the park board is and does, I think, for the context of this Q&A, and feel free to, if there's anything that I should clarify, feel free to hop in. So I think when most people hear park board, they hear like who cleans the slides and like who makes sure that the asphalt on the parkways looks nice, which it is those things as well. The park board manages a lot in Minneapolis, a lot of like invisible things that we all benefit from. The park board manages the forestry department, which like plants and maintains every tree available on public land. Every boulevard tree, every time you like ride down a street and you see that like healthy canopy of trees, park board. We are the #1 childcare provider outside of the Minneapolis public school system in Minneapolis. We're the largest provider of social child services in the whole city. We maintain every parkway in the city, and have two kind of phases of like how we think about parkland. So we manage something like 15% of the acreage in the city, and of that acreage, there are like neighborhood parks and regional parks, and they kind of get treated differently, different lenses. But the role of a park board commissioner with regards to like what you think of when you think like playgrounds or regional parks is like determining budgeting and determining like long range planning for those sites.
Awesome. Thanks, Risa. Cool. So I'm gonna start off with the questions that we got from the forum, but folks should feel free to submit questions in the Q&A box while we're talking, and I will keep an eye on those as we're going too. So just to kind of kick things off, can you tell us about what your approach to community engagement will be and how you will bring the movement to the park board?
Yeah, so I think that the park board has historically had some very like good involved commissioners insofar as like they go out of their way to try to connect with folks. I think that for a variety of circumstances, I think that we can do a lot better in just doing direct communication with neighbors, with community members, with stakeholders. I think the old status quo was like you're a good parks commissioner if you show up to the neighborhood meetings, and I think that neighborhood orgs are great things. There are a lot of neighborhood orgs that are doing a lot of really good work in the community. With that being said, that there are like equity concerns with neighborhood org membership. I think there are a lot of other different, better ways that we can connect with neighbors, making sure that like we're out in the spaces that we're managing. We're making sure that we're holding office hours in public space, and coming to the people rather than expecting the people to know when their neighborhood organization meeting is, or know what the right channel of communicating the right representative for the right place that you live or the place that you're recreating. I think that there's a lot of unintentional, but a lot of gatekeeping that happens in especially very local government with regards to just like how difficult it is to access the right information to get connected with the right people if you have a concern or a vision for a space that you want to use. And I seek to undo that insofar as I can.
Awesome. So I think that there have been kind of a couple hot issues with the park board this past year, which you touched on a little bit on the encampments that have been popping up in the parks. Can you, and like, I think the police presence is kind of intertwined and we'll touch on both.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about what your vision for park board response and involvement with encampments would be?
Sure. And I do just want to say really quickly, I'm a person who I've spent the better part of 30 years in Minneapolis, and I say that only to indicate that in those decades, I have never inhabited a Minneapolis where people don't take shelter in public space. I think that we've had a lot of conversations these last couple of years about homelessness in public space because it has begun to feel very visible to a lot of people, which is I just want to make sure that we're not erasing that is a history that we've had in Minneapolis for a very long time. And I think we should continue to expect folks to take shelter in public spaces for as long as we're incapable of offering or like meeting the housing needs of the people who live in Minneapolis. As long as there is a housing market, and as long as the market has fewer units available than people that desire to live in Minneapolis, like we are going to have processes for dignified outreach to folks who are taking shelter in parks. With that being said, I completely oppose the destruction of property of unhoused people in parkland. I believe that housing is the cure for unhoused homelessness, and I I know that there were things that parks staff did last year that um, that should be avoided at all costs. I do also think that the folks that we have on the parks staff, some of them are some of the best people I think we have on staff in Minneapolis. And I saw several outreach staff go out of their way, just like without being asked to, without direction from the top, so to speak, to perform quality outreach to folks that were taking shelter in parks. And I know that we can do that as a board, and I just want to make sure that going forward, it's like we have processes, we know how to perform good quality outreach, and the folks that are doing that work, I need them to be given the right tools and the right training to do that. Um, and I think it's okay also to have more conversations about the what went wrong of outreach or the lack thereof in the last year. I think there's a lot to dig in on there, and a lot of process improvement that's got to happen. Go ahead and let me know if you feel like that answered the bulk of that question, or if there's something more that you want to dig into there.
Yeah, for sure. I think maybe if you want to just speak a little bit about to kind of your thoughts on what you feel like went wrong last year, and also like what you feel like went right, because you touched on that a little bit
Hmm.
too,
Hmm.
and what you might what you see outreach looking like in a better world this year,
Yeah.
next year.
Yeah. So just real quick, I can only speak from my experience as a neighbor. I can't speak for other organizers. I can't speak for the population of unhoused people at large. I only have my own set of experiences. Um, I think that like last summer, there were a lot of conflicting crises happening in the same crunched time period, and I don't want to blame people who were in very difficult decision making situations for the decisions that they made in those times. With that being said, um, I don't think it's ever necessary to standardize taking shelter on stolen land, and I think a mistake of the well-meaning commissioners of during last summer was this point where there was this ask, how do we make it okay for people to take shelter in public space? And that's like that was asking the wrong question, so they came to the wrong conclusion. um, i I hope that like we can be both pragmatic and conscious of how we're working with people moving forward. I don't think that I don't think that that decision where the park board decided like we are going to make a permitting process to give people permission to take shelter here. We're also going to like cut off um, hygiene resources, water, electricity, like these things that are always supposed to be public utilities available at parks, um, whether or not a pandemic is occurring. Like people need access to these facilities, and choosing to say um, we're going to standardize what it looks like to take shelter in parks, but we are also going to limit access to these like basic necessities. Um, I think that was wildly inappropriate, and I I hope to be the reason that that kind of thing never happens again. Um, I'm a person who I believe in a police-free future. I understand that we have a park board right now, and that we have a park police force right now, and that if we didn't have a park police force, the Minneapolis Police Department would respond to any dispatch calls in parks, and I think we can all agree that that would be a very bad thing comparatively. With that being said, I was really disappointed by a lot of the park police response in parks to encampments or to calls for um, response for unhoused people. Um, an example being like I witnessed somebody experiencing a mental breakdown, a person who like should have had a responder who could have like helped de-escalate the situation that they were experiencing and gotten them the resources they needed. And instead, like a park police officer, because they witnessed this person behaving in a certain way, like this person ended up in jail. And that's a thing that like we should be avoiding these kinds of like setting people back at all costs. I think there's this really dangerous rhetoric going around right now of folks asking us to consider like what the mission of the park board is, and trying in that way, in that vein, to eliminate um, like people taking shelter in parks as like, well, this isn't in the mission statement, therefore like this is justification for removal. um, I don't think I need to make any statements on why that is entirely wrongheaded. We serve, like, as the board, we serve every person who is a user of parks, and like putting people in jail for experiencing mental health crises in parks is not part of the park board's mission.
So relatedly, can you speak a little bit to the relationship between the park board and the park police, and also like the severing of the relationship with MPD this past year, and what pieces of that you maybe agree with and would have voted in favor of, with what parts you might have done differently, what you would like to see done differently
There,
if you're elected?
there is not a clear enough separation between the Minneapolis Police Department and the Park Police. I think that um, on paper that may appear that way, um, and that that separation, if it needs it, that separation needs to be happening in practice. I'm unsure of how much I'm entitled to say about this. So just like feel free to push back if you like need more information here. I think I have to be
Whatever
like
you
a
want.
little bit careful, but um like the park police still operates with the same infrastructure as the Minneapolis Police Department. The park police are still on the same radio calls. They're still using the same lines of communication as the Minneapolis Police Department. Like the terrible biases that we see in Minneapolis Police Department officers are intrinsically linked to those that we're going to see in park police officers. Um, and if we want to maintain a park police, um, we're going to need a more total separation between those two entities in the next couple of years.
Awesome. Can you speak a little bit to your vision for youth programming in parks, and kind of the childcare that you mentioned in the intro, and what you would like to see the park board be doing there?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now we have a lot of great kinds of programming. The programming, like user interface that we have for folks, is largely inaccessible to a lot of people. It's not usable, for example, on like mobile devices. It's very complicated to get your kids signed up for programming. I hope to see just like an improved user experience for the adults in the room doing the registration. Um, and I would like to see us working with the equity matrix that we already have better for addressing where programming needs more resources or needs expansion. There are a lot of like rec programs that are underutilized right now because they are um, either like in areas where they're not needed as much, or in areas where there's some kind of communication barrier between the park system and the neighborhood. And we can fill both of those things, like we can fill both of those gaps at the same time, like performing quality outreach and also just running the numbers and verifying like, is there this much of this need in this community, or are these resources better utilized in this other community? Um, and spreading those resources accordingly, I think is going to do a lot of good for us.
Awesome. Um, Next question. Why should Twin Cities DSA members support you rather than other candidates running in this race?
I should probably have a ready-made answer for that, but this is catching me off guard a little bit. Feel free to help me out if you need to. Man, I'm struggling because I came into this race after working very hard with some neighbors to find a person that was right for this position in this moment. Like Minneapolis has been the center of a global reckoning about racial inequity and structural racism, and like I am a white person. With that being said, um, I didn't come into this race lightly. I am running up against a slate of fairly conservative people. And when I say fairly conservative, I mean like to the degree of dog whistles about why brown people shouldn't be in parks. Um, so I'm struggling. I'm struggling with this question a little bit because honestly, like even just as a constituent in District 6, the alternatives are very scary to me. I I mean, I have a vision of Minneapolis and our public spaces that is going to set us up for the future that we want to be. But I'm also very scared of the future that we're going to regress towards um, with the alternatives.
So I think this is kind of a related question to what you were touching on. But can you speak to why this, so with our endorsement process, we can choose to like endorse candidates. There are some races where there are multiple candidates who are running and we could choose one or the other, but also in every race, we could also choose like not to endorse anyone. And you are the only, as you would probably assume based on your answer, you're the only person in running for park board in general, who is seeking Twin City DSA's endorsement. Can you speak to why you think it would be strategic for DSA to endorse this race in general and like get involved in the park board race?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am not a current member of the DSA, and I don't want to speak on behalf of your priorities or your principles. But I will say that I believe that the DSA is in a place right now where like the phase of DSA's development as an organization is in power building, in building a base of grassroots groups that have real efficacy on the city, state, and local levels. Excuse me, city, state, and national levels. And I I see the park board as being I understand that um as a park board commissioner does a really thankless, like mostly out of the spotlight job. Um but the work that we do is some of the most boots on the ground, talking directly to the people, working directly to meet people's basic needs. Um, we have a lot of interface with the community, and I think that in and of itself is a powerful thing. Um, I think that's how we build as a movement, is in these like direct conversations with neighbors, immediate relationships with stakeholders in our local areas. Um, and I think also, and feel free to push back on this. I think one of the gravest sources of inequity in our society is how we use land. Who is allowed to use land? Who belongs in the commons? Um, and I think that we can do a lot of good in radical inclusion in public space. And and if we're being honest, like if I was allowed to have, this vision of the park board, it is that, like, I want to provide us with social services for families. The things that are most cost burdening families right now are like, can my kid get good programming? Um, where do we meet to sew the fabric of democracy? We don't do that in private institutions. Like, we do that in public space. Um, I think that the park board operates in all of those realms, and that's why I'm excited to be sitting at the helm, so to speak.
Awesome. So we're going to shift over to the questions from the Q&A box. We have a couple in now, and folks can feel free to keep them coming as we're rolling through these. And we'll be going until 7. So until 7 or until questions run out. So whichever comes first.
Great.
So first question that we have, what is the relationship between the park board and the mayor, and how would you approach a pro-cop / anti-encampment mayor?
This is a tough question because, like, Risa Hustad, a human being, like, there's a point where I don't want to play ball with somebody anymore, and I think it's fair to say that, like, most people in this room are going to be in that camp right now. With that being said, I I I approach governing similarly to how I've been taught to approach the medical model of addiction, which is like, if I can do no good here, I want to reduce harm. Um, and doing what I can to work with, let's call this person a pro cop mayor, this theoretical pro cop mayor. I don't know who you're talking about. Doing what I can to collaborate with a pro cop or anti encampment mayor um, would look like how I would do my best to identify, like, what are we both agree on, what are our end goals, do we have shared end goals, what can I do to make it so that we can both meet these end goals so that the people win. um, and I'm, I don't love making compromises around um, my core values, but there are a lot of times where, if you're working with with an establishment that is going to cause harm, and you can do something to reduce that harm, um, I will do my best to just, like, weigh my options and like, preserve human life over uh, looking like I did the right thing, I think.
Awesome. Okay, rolling through questions
Yeah.
to the next one. Certain parkways have been closed or partially closed during the pandemic to allow for social distancing. Closed to cars, I think, is what this person means. Feel free to clarify if that's not what you meant. Do you think there might be merit to closures like this beyond the pandemic to increase available public space?
Yeah, and this is a pretty easy one. Absolutely, yes. The like, opening the parkways to people was one of the most popular things the park board has ever done. People loved it. The only thing that people didn't love was the price tag, and um, we're literally voting, like there was a vote just this year to allocate funding to, like, permanent infrastructure for closure to cars, so that the park, like, different parkways could be open to people, based on just, like, hey, like, it's Labor Day, we're gonna open this parkway to people because we can. Um, and yeah, that's an easy one. Like, everybody loved it, and there's an easier, cheaper solution coming down the pipeline. I'm excited.
Sweet. I'm just going to read this question word for word, so the I is not me. I was a bit confused by your response on the questionnaire about the Upper Harbor Terminal. Could you clarify your thoughts on the project's future?
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to apologize. And feel free if, like, you person who posted this wants to hop in here. I don't have my questionnaire in front of me. I'm unsure of, like, which response was confusing. Um, just feel free to bear with me here, but the Upper Harbor Terminal, for those who don't know, it is a site. It was up for reconstruction or to be like revisioned. There are there were several different like maybe contrasting or conflicting ideas about like what to do with the site, as is common with like public property. Um, I think that the decision that we landed on is not definitely not great. It is not like it doesn't meet a lot of, I think, of our hopes for the site. It doesn't offer any kind of housing on site. It doesn't there are a lot of amenities that we were hoping to get out of it, I think, that are not coming out of it. With that being said, I understand it to be a done deal, and I'm going to do what I can to like make the best of that site. Um, Go ahead, and if you person who asked that question are still in the chat, feel free to let me know if I answered your question.
Awesome. So those are all the questions that we have in the Q&A for right now. I'm going to go over just a little bit what the next steps in our endorsement process are, to also give folks, if they have more questions that they want to submit, put them in while I'm talking, and then we will circle back to them. But so that folks know who are on the call or who are watching this later, and Risa, so that you know too, the next steps in our endorsement process are, this is our last Q&A, so that's the stage that we are at right now. We are wrapping this up with the end of this one. And what will happen after that is discussion has been happening and will be ongoing, like in the TCDSA Slack, about which candidates folks are wanting to endorse, which races seem strategic, what our capacity looks like. And that discussion will be held more formally via a member Zoom meeting, where there will be opportunities to talk to each other and talk about the different candidates who are running and talk about the different races that it would be possible for us to endorse in. And after that has concluded, and I do see the other questions coming in now too. After that has concluded, we will then be sending out an open vote ballot to all of the members, and folks will fill out the ballot, and then we will endorse candidates based on votes from membership. And once we have done that, we will start running independent campaigns for the candidates who we have endorsed. And that'll be that. And then they'll hopefully all get elected. So
great plan.
That's that. Moving to the questions that have come in. So this person says, asking of other candidates as well, and I see the question in the chat too, so I'll ask that one too. Asking of other candidates as well, are you a landlord, AKA, do you own one or more investment properties with tenants?
Nope. Like over half of the residents of Minneapolis, I rent the place that I live.
Awesome. Next question. Can you tell us more about what you did at the MLK encampment? What did you take away from your experiences there?
Yeah, I see that we have 22 minutes left, and I will not bore you all with all of the answers that I could give for that. Just very briefly, we as a neighborhood, like, we came together and we identified, like, this is a thing that we all want to be like working on, collaborating on. We actually have one or two folks that take shelter at MLK Park throughout the year. So like, just as a neighborhood, we're aware of that, and we have like kind of a culture of like knowing how and when to check in. With that being said, having a fairly like large group of people, all of that felt like all of a sudden were all moving to Martin Luther King Park, we kind of needed to organize a little bit more. So just like regular like check-ins to make sure that like the basic needs were being met. A lot of really exciting emails about if there is enough water and if the porta potties were too full or whatnot. And just like just a lot of the basic stuff. Some of the more important work though was like working one-on-one with folks that were there, trying to identify like, hey, what's your background, what are you like, what's going on right now, what are you hoping for right now, what kind of supports can we offer you, how can we get you to where you want to be? Do you want to be here? Do you want to be in some kind of like supportive program? Do you want to be in some kind of like independent housing? What's going to work for you? And we just like went hard in the paint to like push and pull on the levers of power insofar as we could to get all of those needs met. And I don't think that it's not like it wasn't a race, but I felt like we did a fairly good job of identifying like our role here as advocates for these folks. But we're going to do whatever we can to like meet them where they are and try to get them connected with what they need.
Awesome. Okay, that looks like it's all the questions that we have. Do you want to just kind of do a little wrap up, kind of final words before we wrap things up?
Sure. I do just want to say that I understand that the park board doesn't feel like a very important or powerful part of our local government. And I understand and I relate. I think that the position itself is an important, powerful place to have a person who centers people. It is a place where a surprising amount of money goes. A surprising amount of money goes to programming that I think a lot of us would be a little bit uncomfortable with if we ran the numbers. And it's a place where there are huge opportunities for growth. There are huge opportunities to meet our equity gaps, to lead on climate change through like simple practices that we're already doing but not doing enough of. And I think that there's real potential in this role. And with that being said, I also think that we can easily out organize our competition if we have the right resources. And people have been very enthusiastic about the campaign itself. Like folks have been very generous in donating really early. But when this one ask that I have is like, it's not a big race, it's not a big ask, but being able to connect with more people and having like more deeper connections with folks that are going to vote early would be huge for this race. And I really hope that you all consider small investment in this small race to have a big impact on the city.
Yeah, one more question that came in as you were speaking. Is there any topic that someone hasn't asked about that you had prepared to speak on or would like to speak on and would like to mention for folks to know?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of these are the questions that I expected given the year that we've had. As a transportation advocate, I would be remiss if I didn't say that one of my top priorities and like one of my babies is developing a parks system that is accessible to everybody. Right now, a lot of our parks are only accessible by people who are operating motor vehicles. And I think that we can close that gap really quickly and easily if we just have the right leadership in place. And I'm just really excited to get to work looking at the spreadsheets.
Awesome. Thank you, Risa. And if folks who are watching this, want to reach out to you or learn more, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, and I just want to say really quickly, if you have questions for me, great, I want to hear them. But also, if you have suggestions, or if something that I said doesn't sit well with you, or if you just want to discuss something further, don't hesitate. The easiest way to get a hold of me is risa@risaforparks.com. But you can also get after me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I'm at Risa for Parks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks for wrapping up our Q&As for our endorsement season. So thank you so much for taking the time. And thanks to the folks who are attending too for taking the time or watching this later. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all for having me.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.